Welcome to No Breakaways, your source for all the Zwift racing tips and tricks. We're here for another episode of Outside the Draft. I'm here with my co-host, Jackie Godby from Sarah's Pro's Closet, 4S Endurance, and a non-athlete. Jackie, how's it going?
Going great, thank you. I've got my coffee in hand.
Anyone can be cool, but awesome takes practice. I like it.
Yeah.
I always feel like Jackie one-ups us, Jordan. I feel like that's the theme of this show.
It's the
Your
theme.
props ready, like all in the background.
How'd your races go this week, Jackie? She's like, all right, won a couple races here and there, Premier League, NBD.
Yep.
And of course we have Jordan Shane, peakformcoaching.com. He is a pro cyclist for Elevate Webaplex, and he's on the Finesse esports team in Zwift. Jordan, what's happening?
Not too much. Just a little snow on the mountain today. It's May. It's snowing a little bit. So I was back on the Zwift machine today.
It's going to be 88 here on Saturday. We're going swimming. It's going to be awesome.
Beautiful.
And
I think it's supposed to be raining and disgusting here on Saturday, so I'll be joining you on Zwift.
Are you still in Chicago?
I'm still in Chicago. We have another month here.
Okay. So I mean, I'm only like an hour away from you. It's not supposed to rain here as of right now. So you can come out to the pool too, hang out with the kids. We can sing Disney songs.
People come to this show for local weather reports. I know that.
I know. That's everybody who writes to me tells me they want more Northern Illinois weather, please. I mean, where else would they get it? Somebody should make a website for that.
Like Midwest weather complaints. Just go, please.
100%. I love it. All right, well, let's hop right in. First of all, did either of you two race at all this week? I think you two said you were training.
Training.
So
yeah, this was the first week of actually not racing in a while and just hitting the solid training volume that I've been putting off since January.
Nice. Yeah, so I did the Herd Summer Race Series, which is kind of like ZRL, but I think it came along before ZRL. So they have the sprints and they have all the time. But it was a really good race series, really high quality racers. It was super fun. One of the guys knew who I was. He's like, you should do course previews for the Herd Summer Race Series. So it was really cool. It was a good experience. Nice group of people, it seemed like, until they dropped me. Then I didn't like them anymore. But yeah.
Where did they drop you? That's the question. Was this like we're trying to drop you, like this is a spite drop, or was this we all just decided we're gonna go 6 watts per kilo and sorry you can't hang with us, man.
So this might be a foreign topic to you, Jackie, but some of us aren't good enough to keep up the whole time.
That's a thing.
Yeah, so yeah, what happened is on these sprints, which my fitness is trash right now. I lost a lot. Thankfully, Jordan told me to take some time off. Now I'm feeling good again. I'm getting better for sure. But so it was on one of the Watopia courses. I don't even remember what it was, but it was you have that sprint. You go through the Italian villas, and then you have that sprint, and then you have that uphill. Like a little, It's just a little bit of an uphill. Well, so the sprint, everybody went hard. And in retrospect, I should have done the sprint harder. But what happened was I got to the back, and then I didn't have enough left to get up the hill with the group. So I got stuck in the second group, which was probably a little more my speed anyways, because we had to go up the reverse KOM. And I wasn't going to make it up. Oh, it was out and back. We went to the volcano.
Okay.
So it didn't really matter where I got dropped. I was getting dropped somewhere.
Such as
yeah. It's funny. I look at the times, and I used to be able to do them, back in like December. So yeah, it's one of those things, climbing the mountain again.
That's the off season, right? Like, I mean, that's what we forget with Zwift and indoor training. We're like, I think especially this sort of like introduction of competition year round, we no longer give ourselves the benefit of an off season of like, hey, it was winter and I got out of shape and I didn't train.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, cool. I went and did something else with my life. I got in basketball shape for 3 months,
Yeah.
I like your philosophy though, Rick. It doesn't really matter where you get dropped because eventually you're going to get dropped. And really, no matter how good you are, unless you're Egan Bernal or Remco, you're going to get dropped sometime. So you might as well just choose your moment, I guess.
Well, and I wanted a hard race, and I knew that would be manageable but hard, like until we got to the volcano. I didn't factor in the sprints like I should have. I just don't have the VO2 right now. Which is fine. Like, sometimes you're in crap shape. That's okay. But yeah, it was super fun. Encourage anybody to do it. And then and today I DS'd for a couple teams, and it was super cool. I saw something really neat. One of the teams in the Americas East B1 division, a guy got dropped from their team, and when other teams were coming to pass him, he'd take his watts all the way down to 0 to let him pass, which I thought was super classy move. I think he was on the Royal team maybe, but shout out to that guy. I noticed it. I appreciated it. If I wouldn't have been so far back, I would have messaged you. But just it was just a cool maneuver. I thought I'd point out that it's a classy thing to do. If you're the one solo person who gets dropped, drop it down to 0. Let the team pass. It doesn't affect you. You're not doing anything. So
yeah. Well, let's talk TTTs then.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, Premier League team time trial today. Race number 7 of 8. So it's getting pretty crunch time, especially on the men's side. Like women's side, we're I think High Nose clinched it unless they get 0 in the last race, and Movistar gets 20. But anyway, on the men's side, like there's some teams in with a chance to take the title still. It's not a runaway from Canyon at all. And this was an interesting course. This is so much more interesting than the Greatest London Flat, just because there's a big extended hill in it. And it's not, the reverse KOM isn't that hard, but it really affects people's mentality on the race and affects the approach as well. So I talked to Rick earlier in the week, and we were talking strategy. And I know an emergent strategy on this kind of a course is always, let's burn a guy. That's like the number one. Let's burn a guy before the climb. And then maybe we'll burn another one up the climb, and we'll go so fast. Let's burn a guy. And it's like, that sounds fun. But actually, my philosophy in team time trialing is, if all possible, keep your whole crew together. Even if one guy can do one extra pull of 30 seconds, that's 2 minutes of net recovery for everybody else. Obviously, one extra guy means 4 times that in recovery, which is so valuable. Well, I won't pat myself on the back too much, but today, top teams on the men, BZR, Callus, Next, and Draft. Guess how many riders they all had at the finish? 5.
Really?
Actually, Next got down to 3, but they had 5 through most of the race, and they were dosing it pretty well. But BZR, Callus, Draft, all 5, and all pulling quite smoothly the entire time. And then you looked at teams down the order, and it was the 3-rider minimum quite a lot, because they burned a guy, or they'd gone really hard up that climb and not, thought they couldn't afford to lay back and let the last guy stay on, which is 100%. You might lose 5 seconds on that climb, but there's 23 minutes of racing after the descent off that climb. So you gotta, having 5 riders is a big deal. So that was the story of the day. New winner, new course record, 2 new course records on the men's side. Alice broke it, and then BZR broke it as well. And BZR takes the win. And that's the team, if anybody doesn't know, of Leonard Tungles, who is one of the more powerful riders in the peloton, pro on the road, and just does some pretty spectacular power outputs in these races. And so I looked at his power file, and it turns out he was pulling about 40 to 50% of the time, and which is unbelievable. He averaged 5.9 watts a kilo. Looked like one other guy on the team was also at 5.9. So it might have been just 2 guys doing most of the pulling. And I think they, it didn't look like anybody was ever pulling on the front at 7.5 watts a kilo necessarily, or 8. It was just very smooth. They never had a spot where somebody wasn't. And I think with the new draft physics, that's probably how you have to do it, is like smooth as fast. Even if it feels like you're holding back, like if you over pull and then get sectioned off and we have to slow down, I think that's what the time is coming from with the new physics especially. So that's how the race was won on the men's side. On the women's side, my theory was also affirmed. I know 5 riders and they caught their nearest competition on the line, and they were so smooth. Of any of the teams watching the entire time, they were always together, and they came to the line in a perfect train. You know, it was just yeah, it's poetry in motion. And their watts per kilo I looked at too, 4.6 average for the team. That would have put them 13th in the men's field, so about top half for watts per kilo. So yeah, they basically responded to a loss last week quite emphatically and took the win. So yeah, those are the results.
So
And you
Jordan,
guys have yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I actually have a question, and I'll put this to you too, Rick, in terms of strategy. For TTs, and precisely as you said, with this new draft physics that smooth is king. Because we're starting to see it taking a couple seconds for that draft to kick in, do you think that it's advantageous to lengthen pulls, by 5 seconds, go from an average of, 15 to maybe 20 seconds, just to minimize that time that you're starting to drop out of that draft? If you can have 9 turns instead of 10, is that going to be worth a couple seconds in a race like this?
I think so. From my perspective, it's like every pull exchange is actually now quite a big risk of losing time because if you don't, and it's random too. It's like, oh, you didn't get it right now. The game spat you out to the side every
Mhm.
time. And so, like risk management, like I would even say 45-second pulls would be smart at this point. If it was my team, I would want that because it would be like less pain and suffering coming around the back each time. I think you're right, Jackie.
I mean,
Uh,
oh, go ahead.
oh no, no, I was gonna ask my second follow-up
So
question
yeah,
about something
so
totally
I
else.
want to.
So go for it.
So here's what I noticed de-essing today is that Jordan's totally right in terms of smooth as king. I know I hate admitting it, but
Once in a while.
but I mean I think the other things that are going on with the new physics, especially, it has changed the way we have to TTT. So not only is it harder to kind of pull through, but it's harder to get in your line. It's almost impossible. Like Hino's doing it because they're like super duper 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 good. They're like next level. By the way, if anybody from Hino is watching this, or if you know somebody who rides for Hino, I want to talk to you about something. Um, Rick at No
Crap.
Breakaways.
What's the secret sauce? Tell us.
Yeah. Rick at nobreakaways.com. Shoot me an email for real. That's actually what I want to talk to you about. Let's do a video. But people are riding all over the road. It's really hard to get in line. And so once you do get in the line, you need to take advantage of being in the line because it's so hard to get in the line. The physics are so weird and they really are penalizing small people. Like I noticed that today, I DS'd a women's team and they had one woman who was like 40 kg. And I mean, she just kept getting these weird gaps, even though it's not like she was going 3 watts per kilogram. The person in front of her was 4.5. They're both 4.5. Somebody comes back and she just gets tailed right off. And the same thing with our team tonight with the men. We had two guys who were quite a bit lighter. And I mean, they just could not keep these gaps. I mean, it's not right how it looks and how it is actually unfair. Like I was joking with Jackie before the show that they won't let her TTT because she'll just mess up everybody, all the light people. But like,
Yeah.
That is how it's been with the old draft physics too. So
yeah,
full disclosure, I'm not a good team TT.
well, and I think it's made it much tougher for the lighter people. I mean, one guy, he's the strongest watt per kg guy on our team, and today, I mean, he had to skip a pull at one point, and he's never skipped a pull before, just because it took him like 0.6, 0.7 more watts per kilo just to stay in the draft.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you can lengthen it to 45 seconds, maybe a minute,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
and just lower your power a little bit to make up for that, you might actually you might be able to trade power for speed to some degree, and I don't know to what degree.
and it makes sense too because the watts required to go that extra kilometer an hour faster just get more and more. So even if it's 10 watts less, that might cost you 0.1 kilometer an hour when you're at 50. But and that makes sense your observation when it comes to the BZR team too, because I look those guys are light. Like there's a couple 70 kilos, but they're 60. One guy's 59. So maybe they know that. Maybe they know that the draft messes up the lighter riders, especially, and they just keep it smooth and long. And hey, it worked. Like they crushed it. They distanced Canyon, and now coming into the last part of the last race in Surrey, which we'll spend plenty of time on. Like it's a tight deal on the men's side. It's exciting. I think there's like 7 points separating the top four, something like that. So,
Wow.
yeah. And before we move on, I was thinking like we bitch about TTs not being exciting. And this one still wasn't very exciting. I was riding the trainer, so it was like kind of, vicarious exciting. But I came up with this is like my BuzzFeed article 3 things to make the TTT better. Um, and I think the first one is the camera shot they use. I hate this view where they're right behind the team and they're just like sitting as if they're the sixth rider. I think it makes it look slow and it doesn't give you any context for the speed or what's ahead or what's behind. So that's trash. I think we need the helicopter shots. I brought it up last week. They need to come up so that you can see 2 teams. They're only 30 seconds apart. See them at once and see the gap. Like they do that all the time on road cycling TV is the big shot, and especially in time trial racing. So I think that would make it way more exciting, and it would look fast as you're tearing through the road. So that's number one. I also think and this applies to road races too. Like we need the timer and the speed on the screen for these riders. Like we should be able to see how fast they're going. And as we're coming down the finishing stretch, we should see their time in real time and have that compared to the best time. That's
Mhm.
what they do on Tour de France. If you've ever watched it, you see them tick by. Okay, now you're second, now you're third, now you're fourth. Bam, you're in. That's exciting. That's like tension. So I think that'd be great instead of waiting and then it's like, oh, that's what time they got. That would help. And then the third thing we're talking about already, the physics. One thing can be fixed from a rider experience, but if they even just fix it on the visual so it looked like the riders were closer, like I don't know whether it's one without the other, whether you could do it, but it looks bad. Like the riders are all over the place, and it's like, what am I watching here? How bad are these guys? One guy's way back here, one guy's up there, 2 are over on the other side of the road. So anyway, I just think the visual experience is what'll draw you in here, because it could look pretty cool, and those are the things I would do.
I'll actually build on top of that. I 100% agree to your second point of just like the countdown to what the best course of the time is. I actually think, we should pull in what they do in the Olympics, particularly in swimming, where they project the best
Oh,
timelines. Like here's the world record, here's how fast the course record would be going. Here's how fast the fastest times so are, like see them chase that virtual line,
that's a great
you know.
idea.
Yeah,
Because
that'd be
then you get an
exciting.
idea of like, are they catching it? Are they distancing? Like, is this a back half race or is this a front half race? And that's something I, again, just really enjoy watching in the Olympics every 4 years. And then to your third point of get a sense of how the draft mechanics are, you know, I think that Zwift, particularly for the viewers, could come up with overlays of heat maps showing how well the teams are doing in terms of sitting in that hot draft zone.
Yeah,
Like
lots
if,
of stuff.
as racers, we're supposed to intuit it, we're supposed to practice, we're supposed to feel and figure out where it is, but, viewers can't see that. But I think if Zwift, created a heat map overlay and they're like, oh, yeah, look how this team is all within this bright red pocket of maximal draft. Oh, look, their back riders slipping out into, maybe this green zone. This is where we're going to see trouble. I think that really would help, particularly community league riders who want to know, who want to visualize, who want to understand and learn more about what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, they do a bit of that, but they could definitely make that a main, and they could use that feature a lot. Yeah.
I mean,
So
I think to those points, there should Zwift needs to err on the side of overloading people with data
yeah.
and then take stuff away because I should never see a shot ever of just the teams riding and not have any data. Never,
Exactly.
ever.
I
Like there
mean, the
Yeah.
has to
data
it's there. It's
Yeah.
going into the game. You can pull it right out.
If you watch any other endurance sport, there's almost always an overlay of some data,
Something.
whether it's just the time even, right? But, yeah, we only get kilometers to go and kilometers ridden. Like, what's that about?
Yeah, I mean, like, show me the percentage of max heart rate that the lead person's at. Show me, I mean, show me them suffering with all their wattage and stuff. Show me that heat map. Show me the line. Like, those are all amazing ideas.
Show me their
just
power, because I still love to see how incredibly awesome these athletes are.
yeah,
Like,
just
I love it.
put a shitload of stuff on the screen and see what people complain the most about and remove that.
There you go.
Like, you put whatever you can on the screen, like crowd it up, because I want to know what is happening. That's the thing about Zwift. We always talk about it. Like, Zwift is not road cycling. You have to put the power in the game. You have to have a weight in the game. You have to have your heart rate in the game. You have to do all this stuff. It's not like road cycling where if they show me a picture of Jordan cycling on the road, I know nothing about Jordan. I don't have a way to get that data. I have a way to get all the data about Jordan and Zwift. I mean, to the point where, like, for Worlds, when I watched you two in Worlds, I did not watch the broadcast. I just went to Watopia and I fan viewed you two.
Yeah, exactly. Why can't we have that? And Community Life has that, right?
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, like, to
it's
me,
ironic.
I knew who won Worlds. I knew Jackie got 5th in Worlds a minute and a half before the broadcast did. Like, I could have went on the broadcast and be like, first place, Ashley Moolman Pasio, second place. Like, they would have been super pissed at me. But still, like, that's not good.
No, it's not good.
It's not good that the best way to watch Zwift is to just do it myself.
It's really not good when in road cycling now, a lot of the broadcasts include all that data. Like, it's called Velon, and it's a software that they use, and they do overlay percentage max heart rate, how much in the red zone during the race. Yeah, it's all there now. And so it's like something as like dynamic as road cycling, so many factors going on to cover. It's like, if Zwift can't do it, why not? Like, they should. So,
I mean, to your point, like, they do it for Kona Ironman. Like, we're seeing average pace, we're seeing average power, we're seeing heart rate. Like, endurance sports, even in real life, are moving towards this, optimization of data. So I think Zwift has a leg up in terms of having so much more data immediately available. This should be their niche, and I would love to see them embrace it even more.
Yeah.
well, hey, look, we did 20 minutes on the team time trial. How good is that?
I will say, as kind of like
Record.
a closing point, because the new draft, at least for me and a lot of the people I talk to, is just not, it's not working. It's not viewed as an improvement. There aren't any more breakaways. I mean, I have a vested interest in making sure there are no breakaways. But no, but seriously, like, we're not getting, like, I don't get what it improved. Like, I can't name one thing where I'm like, oh, this is better now.
It's like just tickling at the edge of, like, it opens up possibilities, but it seems like it hasn't, and it has detriments.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah, I don't even know what possibilities it's opening up, to be honest with you. Like, I don't.
That's a whole other.
The blobs just plow down even smaller blobs, just like they did before. It's not any slower how fast they. I mean, I saw that in cobbled climbs. We had a 5-man break where people were pushing 4.5, and a 15-person blob just ate them right up. I mean, they had a 10, 12-second gap. We'll
talk about it when we get Eric Min on here.
Yeah. If Eric Min's watching, no, I'm just kidding. I know he watches it. He emails me all the time. All right.
Weather.
Yeah, I said on the agenda we can keep this short. So I'm really up on this. So I think probably the rest of the time, almost, we're going to talk about Surrey and things related to Surrey Hills. Mainly because I have to race it, and so I'm afraid of it. So I want to do that. But so let's talk about what we have coming up for next week. Jackie, you rode the course twice because you are a glutton for punishment, apparently, over the weekend.
3-hour ride, and I can only watch so much Community. Actually, that's a lie. I can watch a lot of Community. But I had to pick a course on which to watch Community.
Okay. So tell us about Surrey. What do we have coming up? Let's start talking about, I mean, your tactic of the week, spoiler alert, how to ride a long hill. Tell us about Surrey, what we can expect, and how can I win this course even though I'm in bad shape?
So Surrey is a series of VO2 max hills. They're going to be longer but less steep than New York. The positive side is that you do get a very nice downhill after each one. So we're going to be looking at maxing ourselves pretty much each time we go up a hill, just trying to stay on a draft, trying to stay with a group. Because ultimately, like Volcano, these are pretty draftable for the most part. You can get a definite advantage by staying with the group. Um, but really, what I keep in mind when I do Surrey Hills is that each time I'm going to be treating the hill like I don't have much of a race left after. It's not the finishing sprint. I don't have to pull out a 900-watt sprint to get over the finish line, but I don't have to have a lot left over once I hit that downhill because that's a good recovering downhill, and the rest of the race is really going to take it pretty hard. Um, so coming into a race like this, I actually have two strategies for the hill, and it's going to depend on how I'm feeling that day and the relative fitness of the rest of the course. So the first one, if I'm feeling really, really aggressive and I'm feeling good and I just want to handle whatever the race is going to hand out and I'm not going to get dropped. I will go into those races knowing that the first 3 minutes is going to be much faster and much harder than I would want to sustain if I was going on my own. So I'm probably looking at, a true VO2 max effort between 110 and 120. I'm going to be standing and pushing myself just to hang onto that wheel
On the hill, you're talking about.
on the hill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it starts kind of flat and then you're right into Fox Hill, which is the steepest of the hills.
Yeah. And Fox Hill is a great point to intimidate riders who, have less experience doing these or have less fitness. And every time I've done a race on Fox Hill, um, I see gunners go out there and they really try to use those first 3 minutes just to intimidate the rest of the field and being like, you can't hold this. Like, look at me, look at my awesome power. And then after that 3 minutes, they pull it back to something a little more reasonable. So I always keep that in the back of my mind, like, okay, if I don't think I can hold this to the top of the hill, that's okay. Neither can these racers. Um, but that is a very aggressive strategy, and that relies a lot on you knowing and having faith that I can come back from this red line level. I can still hold FTP. I can still hold wheels. If that's just not happening, if you have just said, you know what, I'm not going to be with that front breakaway group, they've dropped me, or I'm on my own, or I'm going to stick with the second break pack because there are still points there and that helps my team. The second strategy is to really self pace and say, what do I need to do for an 8.5 minute hill? And then you're going to be putting out that slightly FTP plus pace, so, about 105%, standing for the steeper parts, and just pacing, realizing like I have to do this multiple times, but I can leave everything in the tank. I can recover fully. I can hit arrow tuck on the way back down and do it again. And so I really think that is the secret to pacing these longer hills is figuring out whether you're going to pace based off the pack and just accept that more aggressive start, or whether you're going to pace by yourself and know that you will get to the top in the fastest time that you can personally do. I have tried both strategies. I have succeeded and failed with both strategies. Um, Let me tell you, it is one of the worst feelings in the world if you go with that super aggressive first pace and can't make it, and then you get passed, a minute from the top by somebody who did choose to do their own pace. You're like, I suffered more, I'm in more pain, and you're beating me. You know, you ultimately went easier, but you beat me because you took the smarter choice.
Yeah. Well,
So
what's
I,
there's a pretty good way to decide what that is too, right? Is like, and for you, Jack, you're at the top, so you're like, win or die trying a lot of the time, I would assume. But you should be honest with what your power profile is here. If it sets off in those first 3 minutes, and you're 100% correct that you're going to come down into the subway tunnel, easy, easy, and then it starts ramping up. And the first 3 minutes that Fox Hill are very steep, like especially right at the start. If it's be honest, that it's about a 5 minute, maybe longer in the lower categories to the top of the rollers up there, maybe four. um if you are like at 150% of your FTP to hold, you're not going to be able to do it. If you're at 130, it's going to be close. If it's at 120, you can probably do it. So like you should like look at it the first 30 seconds of that climb minute. If it's 150%, like you should start thinking about survival. And the odds are if you're in the right category, the people pushing that pace are going to come back. Like either they're going to finish light years ahead and you don't have a choice, or they're going to come back. So like, yeah, look at your own capacities on this one for sure.
So,
There's no,
150 is definitely not sustainable for a hill
no,
this length. This is what you're going to be holding for forward KOM.
yeah.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
not Fox Hill, not anything like that.
120, 130 tops, I would say. You're
So,
getting dropped.
so I mean, I don't know obviously about outside bike racing, but a lot of times in Zwift, there is a huge time gain to be had by pushing harder than you should earlier on and just sticking with a pack and just saying, I know I'm going to blow up at some point, but I'll have gained 2 minutes on a different pack if I went back to them right now.
Yeah,
So like
correct me if I'm wrong. I think Jackie and I are saying the same thing. Like if you can stay with the group
stay
and
with it,
front load and make the time, you should.
even if you're going to blow up on the next hill.
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
mean, like you're gonna gain. Yeah, you shouldn't go like to the point where you fall off your bike at the top, but you can
Yeah.
go to
Yeah.
95%, right? You
Yeah.
can go really close. And if you've trained for this sort of thing, you should be able to do 5 by 3 minute VO2 intervals and not see a big drop off one after the other, right? Like that's a pretty standard session. So if you've trained that, you should be able to repeat it. And like, yeah, there's a line there though. If you go too deep, like you're not going to be able to repeat anything, not
Yeah.
even a pedaling motion. So like, yeah, there's a line, but I think if you can make it, especially Fox Hill, you get the rollers over the top, you can make it through that downhill, and then Leith Hill is the next one, starts very gradually. So you can probably make it into the first, 12K of the race. I'm just looking at the profile with the pack, if you stay. And then who knows what everybody else have on the next climb, right? It's attrition, it's one climb heroes at the start, like Jackie you're saying too.
Important for me to keep in mind, like every Zwift race I have done, I have never seen a negative split Zwift race. Like the first hill is always going to have the most power. The first sprint is always going to be the hardest. Like if you were like, "Oh my god, I can't do that hill again." Well, the good news is you probably don't have to. Neither can everybody else.
Neither can everybody else.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
the
So
last one. Maybe the last one will be that
the
hard,
last one.
but the ones
Just
in
because,
between.
everybody's throwing their bike across the line, like whatever it takes to get me done with this race and into the shower afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting one. I mean, I'm guessing there's going to be some small breaks to the finish in this.
Oh yeah,
I
it
mean,
should be.
it's going to be
If this is
wild.
if this is a bunch sprint, like this show can be over. Like, come on, man. This is a super hard course.
I
I
mean,
don't think we've
there's a
seen.
reason I have the show title, what it is, or the channel title,
Yeah,
what it is.
well, I think a reduced pack though, at least
Yeah.
in majority of these. Like if we see a
Pack
group
sprint.
bigger than 10, I'd be surprised
Yeah.
in the Premier.
I would also be equally surprised if we saw a group, smaller than 3.
Yeah, no, maybe. Well, maybe one rider gets away on the final climb and wins solo. Because you could, if everybody's tired, it's easier to make these gaps when everybody's absolutely wasted. So there's a possibility. And Fox Hill is the last hill as well. So you get double Fox. If you hate it the first time, you're going to get to see it again right where you don't want to at the end. So, yeah, I think this is going to be super interesting. And like, we do this a lot on the road of like, you got to make the selection early in the race to actually make the time cut. So you got to go as hard as you can over the first climbs before the breakaway goes, or else you get dropped and you get no drafting. And if you're by yourself with 100K to go, you're toast. You're never going to make the time cut. But in this case, we got a tight format. So I don't know. If I was in the men's field and I wasn't at altitude and I was trying to approach this, I would probably count on the fact of like 20 riders making it over the first climb in Premier League. Maybe that number is 10 in ZRL together. But as long as I'm in that top 20 envelope, I'm happy on the first climb. And I'm going to continue doing that climb after climb, is staying with the number I'm comfortable with. You race ZRL every week, whatever category you're at. You know who the strong riders are. You know who the top, whenever there's a climb, the same riders try to attack, so you pick that envelope of like, I'm pretty comfortable these riders are going to make it, and do not push the pace. Like it's like even from the worst climbers to the best, whenever somebody feels like it's going easy and they're feeling strong, they go to the front and they just match the rider in front or whatever. Don't do that. Just even if you're saving 5 watts on this super steep climb, stay in the draft, stay in the top 20, watch for gaps, but stay behind. The best riders do that in the biggest races. You don't see them at the front until the last climb, right?
That's really good endurance coaching in general. Unless you know for sure you're the best person, don't push it. So when I was in college, I was running the 10K. It was my last college track meet, and I was with this group, and there was like 7 of us, and I knew one guy, and there were like 3 guys who had a much better PR than me, like 2 minutes faster, but they were just going slow because and with 3K left, I was like, well, it's time for me to win my first conference title. And so I just started going, and just everybody just went by me, just like they let me lead for a lap, and then the whole race took off. So the other thing you risk when you do that is the top group. If you aren't going to be with if you're like maybe like the second tier, like I tend to be this, like if you're in the second tier of that top group and you push the pace, you risk the first tier tearing off and dropping your sorry ass, and you're better off just to like, nobody wants to do anything, I'll just stay with longer, and then maybe
there's a psychology there to this, though, is like when you get on that climb and you're like, oh, I can ride at the front. And then I can tell my friends that I was riding on the front, dictating the pace. Don't do it. You're going to pay. And like, nobody remembers that you were on the front for 15 seconds before they all sprinted by you. So yeah, I would pick your envelope here. I think that's going to be my advice on this course, is like, know the riders. If you're going to go for the win, if you're a good climber, know the riders that are going to be there at the end. And if you're not a good climber, maybe take a look at the Zwift power and the riders that have been around your level on these climbs and stuff, and decide which group you're going to ride with. And obviously on that first climb, like, test it out. If they're going to let you stay in the front group, that's awesome. But at a certain point, like, pick your group and stick with it. And people might get lazy up front too. They might create gaps on these climbs, and then on the descents and the flats, it's like, who's going to push the pace? Nobody. And the group from behind can come back again. And so you can actually extend your shelf life in the race pretty significantly, being a little more conservative and realistic. You just got to be realistic on this one.
Just to second, your point on don't sit at the front for glory. We spent all this time talking about the team TT and the new drafting dynamics and how you're losing time every time you switch. We have these big hills where we're not seeing gradient changes, we're not seeing rollers. We're going much slower. It's going to be a lot easier to sit and stay in that pocket. As hard as it is to find right now, you can sit and not do the work, and you can make the person at the front, or those 2 aggressive people at the front who are maybe trading off, you can make the draft physics work against them. So it's very much about picking your strategy for the course, for the race, for your body.
I made some notes here for this course, and I'm giving away all my secrets. We're gonna start a Zwift coaching company. I'm breaking that news, and this is a little taste of what you might get, I guess.
Jordan, you're killing me. You're killing me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is great. This is what you do when you approach a race course every week is you know the main features. There's the climbs, and those are going to go a certain way, and we just talked about how to manage that. Everything else though is where you can gain because that's what's variable, right? The climbs are going to be set at a certain power really. Yeah, everywhere else is where you can save energy and do the sneaky things that make people a good racer. And so for a hilly course like this, especially with those new draft physics, when we're coming over the crest of anything, pay attention. Any of these rollers, any of the crests of the KOMs, anywhere where it turns downhill over the top, can't get gapped there. Even if you're on the absolute limit, we cannot let that gap open because an extra second of effort there is going to save you 30, 50 seconds on the downhill, really. And like I noticed this too, as doing some of the group rides, the Tour Watopia. Be careful on the downhills as well. Watch the gaps because as a lighter rider, I just open it up. I'm like, I'm going 70K an hour super tuck. I'm going to be fine. Not so. We have to respond. Watch the gaps, watch the crests. So like, yeah, you have to be very careful on the recovery portions to make sure you actually get recovery here. And then the other note,
Rider, I'm gonna say the opposite. Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing. I 100% endorsing that last crest of the hill. If you've had to work harder than everybody else the whole way up, if you punch it that last 10 seconds, if you just put in that little extra effort, I know you're dying, but then you make all those light guys who got to coast up, they now have to sprint downhill and you're sitting in your super tuck
yeah,
going way faster than they could hope to do. This is now your revenge. Like if you can sprint, if you can make that 1-2 second gap and make them have to work to catch your draft, it's
yeah.
beautiful revenge. It feels so good.
The crests are an inflection point of the race, either whether you're on the back foot or the front foot. Very very important. And on this course, like even there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 climbs officially, but the Surrey Hills course is always undulating, so there could be just always watching the gaps when it's about to turn downhill. And the other thing I have here is when we're going into these climbs, the instinct is going to be to fight for the front. And that's something that comes from maybe real life bike racing. I'm not sure. I see it a lot in a lot of power files. A lot of energy wasted in like the 2 or 3 minutes before a climb. It's like, oh, it's a K to go. I should be at the front. And we're just sitting on a lot of power to stay in the top 10 or even top 5 or whatever, really high up. And then right before the climb, the last 10 seconds, everybody goes by because you've been sitting on this power and your position is lost now. And that's the same in real racing, actually. It's like you can hold a good position a little easier on the road, but like you got to be very aware at the last moment. And so if you want to save energy, you can sit like back third going into this stuff and then like make some notes on your stem or whatever. Climb starts at 6K, climb starts at, 9.9K or whatever it is. And when it's at 9.8K, that's when you get to the front, not before that. Like make a 10-second burst, and the drafting physics reward this. Make a 10-second burst through everybody onto the front, and then you start the climb. And you did 50 watts less than everybody else in the lead up, and that's how you do this thing.
Yeah, those are great tips. Yeah, I don't think you can say it any better. Maybe let's hop into our one big thing, like how to pick power goals. Jackie, you kind of framed this in the context of Three Sisters. You mentioned like the volcano climb attempt, which is very similar to this course, except we have 4 of these stupid hills, being around like 115 to 120% FTP. Maybe talk us through some of that.
So Three Sisters is just a bit of background here. It's a really common power verification course that they ask Zwifters that the Zwift Anti-Doping Agency will ask racers to do just to kind of verify their profiles. And it includes forward KOM to start. It then goes on to epic KOM. It includes the volcano KOM and finishes with the I believe, 300-meter flat sprint into the finish banner in Watopia. And the idea is that you kind of hit your max power for each one of these. So you have a max 1.5 to 2 minute power with forward KOM. You have an FTP-like effort with the Epic KOM. You have a VO2 max-like effort with Volcano. And then you have kind of that, 15 to 30 second fatigued sprint power with that final sprint. And so that's really how, I try to think of these powers when I go in to do the test, is I come in with a good idea of what my FTP is. And for the forward KOM, I know this is going to take me 1 minute and 40 seconds, unless I have a draft, in which case I can break that. So that's really going to be, and we've covered this before, that's really sort of a 150% effort. For those of you from a running background, that's going to be your 800-meter run effort. For those of you from a swimming background, that's your 200-yard freestyle effort. It's all hitting that kind of like, how much pain can I put myself through for 2 minutes before my body just decides, no more. And of course, if it's going to take you longer, if you're starting to reach up to 2-3 minutes, you're going to start to taper that effort level down from maybe 150% down to 140, maybe even 130 if you're really getting up closer beyond 3 minutes. Next, we come to Epic KOM. This is actually a really great place to do an FTP test. For many, many riders, it's going to fall right around that, low 20-minute mark if you do it really well. If you put on the right wheels, right bike. I think my fastest time ever comes in just above 19 minutes, which was a lovely relief to have that FTP test done early. I can tell you there is no better motivation to get up something fast than knowing that you can finish an FTP test a minute early. So for that one, again, treat it like you would treat an FTP test if you know that you can come in at that 20 minutes. If you know you're going to be closer to 24, 25, don't do that 104, 105% effort that you would expect to do during a test. Just hit FTP. And then for that final, that minute climb, when you're on that final uphill, you don't quite see the banner, stand up, grind out a little harder. The finish is in sight, and you get a downhill afterwards. It's fine. You guys may have noticed, I definitely have this strategy of using the downhills as rest, and I would 100% endorse that in all of these downhills as well. You just did an FTP test, please rest, you deserve it. So then once you come down the backside of Epic KOM, do a little flats on the volcano. This is going to be a little longer, actually, than a typical VO2 max test, where we typically say, think about 120% for 5 minutes. The volcano KM typically takes me somewhere between 6.5 and 7. So I purposefully dial my power down to about 115%. There's actually another very popular format of FTP test, which is 2 8-minute tests back to back, and then you take the better of one. And for that one, you actually think, I go 110% rather than the 105 you would go for a 20-minute test. So if you think about it that way and say, okay, I expect that the Volcano KOM is about 8 minutes for me, it's a little less than 8 minutes, it's a little more, you can use that 110% as a good bookmark. So like I said, for me, I know that my time up the Volcano KOM falls between that 125-minute effort and that 110 8-minute effort. So I kind of aim to split the gap and go at 150.
So
Then we
Jackie,
get
I have to ask though, what was your time up the forward KOM and Worlds?
141. I was blasted. Everybody was. I mean, that was our second time up.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that was our second time up. I had already gone, I led a 600 plus watt sprint up the backside for reverse KOM. So, everything was on the line. but it was
Well,
not my fastest time ever.
and Ashley Millman Passio won, and it wasn't that much. It was like what, a 137 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't that. Yeah, I don't think we saw the fastest time on the men's either. Everybody's talking 118, 160, and then it was a little less than you would expect because there's a little attrition there.
Yeah.
But
I mean, if you want to do your best forward KOM, you're
do it
not
fresh.
going to do it at the end of a race.
Oh, do it fresh. I had a great my Three Sisters test. The only good part about it was my forward KOM. I don't know why. Maybe I was rested. It was Christmas. I wasn't riding as much. I just smashed that. I think I did. I just ran the numbers here. 158% of my threshold. So
Fancy.
for a minute 31 or something, minute 30 might be my PR. But yeah, the rest of it was tough. And I'll say this about the Three Sisters, and I don't know who's considering doing it. It's a pretty good all-around fitness test, though, and I think it's motivating because it's like, geographical, like because you're going up these climbs, right? It's easier to do than just saying like, oh yeah, 1 minute test, 20-minute test. For me, anyway, it's kind of interesting to do it. But yeah, I was so blasted after that first effort that I didn't hit FTP on the long climb, and I didn't do much better on the last climb either. So that's a huge lactate load, and like you should rip pedal at like 50 watts for the entire time in between those climbs to try to disperse that. Because a good load of lactate takes like 15 minutes to clear at rest or active recovery, and that's all you have. So you better chill out.
That was actually my exact experience with the last time I did Three Sisters too. I took forward KOM so fast, put down a personal best, put down a 1 minute best power effort, 700 watts, way above 150. And booked it so hard that I actually put myself into an asthma attack and I could not finish, like 4 minutes into Epic KOM and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, okay. So I had to come back a week later. I actually remember backing out of the show that night because I was like, this is gone.
I just sucked. I didn't have an asthma attack. I just sucked.
You telling me you put out 700 watts for a minute?
Yeah.
690. Yeah.
That'll be the highest on this show today.
Yeah.
Hey, I was desperate and angry, and I just wanted to show them I had everything, and
you did.
I left it all there.
So this is just a random question I thought of. Are we all three on Neos?
I am.
Are you, Jackie? Are you on a Neo too? And
what does she ride for, Rick?
Oh, that's right. You're on the Saurus. That's right. I'm sorry. That was stupid.
A what?
Yeah. Sorry, Jackie. Jackie is on a Saurus H3, I'm guessing?
Yes.
The best of trainers, I'm sure. I mean, we're both riding a Neo and we're losing, and she's winning everything on an H3. So
sorry.
I will actually say this. Having been on 2 generations of kickers, the TAC X for Worlds, and now the Ceres H3. What I notice is actually less on the free ride mode in races. What I notice more is actually that each trainer has a very different tolerance in erg mode. So the Wahoo kickers have no tolerance. You are going to hold that wattage come hell or high water. Don't break cadence. Like, you will go from 400 watts to 50 watts in 2 seconds, and everything is just very, very square. The Neo has a lot of tolerance. Like, you can vary your wattages, plus or minus 4% while you're just sitting there. And the Ceres is actually somewhat between the two. I like it because it's got a really good algorithm actually for high cadence work. So if I want to do high cadence sprint work, even in erg mode, it'll let me way overshoot my power target as I'm just trying to spin up. And then it won't penalize me by just removing all of the resistance away.
I've heard that the H3 is best for erg mode.
No, I have never used erg mode.
Really?
No. It does not really applicable to. I don't know. I never liked it because I ride a lower cadence grinding, and like the kicker, like I tried it once, like for a minute, and it was like I was at 70 RPM and I dropped to 65, and that was it. All right, it was very annoying. So no, I like free riding, and I encourage a lot of clients to do a lot of. If they're going to race on the road, time trialing especially, like it's a good skill to have to be able to modulate your power. But that's interesting that it's so different. Maybe I'd do it on the H3. Um, but yeah, interesting notes on power testing. I've come to appreciate, not doing traditional FTP tests. I'll say that as a little tidbit here is like the 20-minute test with the 5-minute blowout effort, it gets old and people hate it. And even the people that like it get so nervous about it. It ruins their whole week of training. And like, I've just come to appreciate stuff like the Three Sisters or the outdoor equivalent, where it's like, go ride that climb as fast as you can. We know your PR's 21 minutes. Let's see if you can do 20. Who cares if that's exactly 105% of what number you are today, the next day? Like your fitness and form changes every day. So the idea of a fixed number FTP is ridiculous. It's like dogma from Training Peaks that you shouldn't buy. So yeah, like I would just, if you want to know what you can hold for a duration, pick something like tangible, especially if you're burnt out on that. I like ramp tests, like they're not always super accurate, but again, the idea of this fixed number, I don't really love. And yeah, so just go bury yourself on a climb, bury yourself on the Three Sisters. I like that sort of stuff. My coach has given me a couple tests where it's like, hold 400 watts for as long as you can. And when I'm in really good form, that's 20 minutes. And if I'm not, then it's 10. And if I'm on a terrible day, it's 2. Like you're just trash. But like honestly, that's very motivating. I gave that to a client and he ended up doing exactly 20 minutes and it was a massive PR. And he's like, I never would have paced the 20-minute test that hard. But you found out that you could hold this power. Just hold it, hold it, hold it. And just when you think you're going to give up, oh, maybe I can do another 10 seconds. It's pretty cool. Like you can, so I would just resist the dogma of like you need to do your 5-minute, 20-minute, 105%, blah blah blah, or the people that say you got to do a 60-minute time trial. I've never done that. I've been a professional bike rider for 6 years, racing for 15. I've never done a 60-minute FTP test. That sounds horrible. So yeah, there's some cool ways to do it. And then the other note is like, we've both talked about kind of like having a bad test already here, and it happens a lot. Like you kind of just fall to pieces. I would just urge everybody not to give up on your FTP tests and say, I don't have good legs today. Because guess what? Like you race all the time on bad legs or mediocre legs. It just happens. And you train all the time on mediocre legs for sure. Just give it a crack. And guess what? That number's probably going to be a lot closer to your max than you predict based on how you're feeling. So
what kind of FTP tests do you both do and how often do you do them?
I don't do a formal FTP test virtually at all. Like I'll do sometimes when training's going super well, like we'll check in and be like, oh, what can you do for 20 minutes? But if things are kind of like status quo, hardly at all. Time trials are a good indicator. It's a little different because you're an aero, but that's a good. And then the occasional KOM in training if you need validation. Like not formal though. Like I wouldn't know what my FTP is to a watt at all.
What about you, Jackie?
Yeah, so I used to do the formal like not ramp test, but the formalized like warm up 5-minute VO2 max test, 20-minute test, 1-minute negative split power in hour 15. That was a standardized test my coach did. I ended up hating it and would only do it twice a year, like kind of minimum. This past year, I have not done it. Actually, I have not done that particular formalized test at all in well over a year. What I have done is I have done Three Sisters, and I have done races with time trials, and particularly, this last kind of winter season when I was doing a lot of time trials in Watopia, Tempest Fugit is a great example, like going 25 minutes. Or there was, I think, a 10-minute time trial in the Joe Martin TT on RGT. And that was a great way where I was just burying myself and I could come back and say, okay, I held this power for 25 minutes. I held this power for 10 minutes. Where does that check in with where I think I am? And um,
Yeah.
they were actually pretty consistent with what I ended up doing when I did my Three Sisters. And we were like, okay, well, it was 19 minutes and 10 seconds. That's close enough to 20. Like, let's take the 95% of that. And, it ended up being within a couple watts. So he said, that's great. We'll stick that in training peaks. If you're having an off day, dial it down. Realize that your body changes day to day. If you're feeling great, dial intensities up. And so, unlike Jordan, I actually do have a pretty good sense of where my FTP is in general, but I also just have this willingness day to day and saying, like, you know what, I have had a terribly stressful week. I'm not going to be able to hold my FTP, or I have slept great this week. I'm rested. I'm well fed. My FTP is right now is probably higher than it was when I tested at that middle level. So
Yeah.
just sort of a willingness to titrate it up and down.
And that's what I meant too, is like, I just, today I didn't do a max 20-minute effort today. I don't know what it was exactly. Maybe it was 10 watts better. Maybe it was 10 watts worse. You just have to be comfortable with that. And unless you're just racing time trials all the time on the road or in Zwift, like, you're never going to be able to dial into exactly what you want to anyway. So, yeah. And I overall, with the peak 4 coaching athletes I coach, probably looking at max of 2 tests a year, even when we haven't had racing. Like, we figured out different challenges, KOMs and Zwift races and stuff, but 2 formal tests a year is a lot for me. I just haven't seen success in checking more often than that.
I feel like I have a ton of questions right now, but we're going to end up running way too long, and we have a couple viewer questions. Did you have something to say, Jackie?
No. Let's go ahead with the viewer questions. I'm sure they're more interesting than mine.
All right. So Joe's Guitar Shop asked, do you notice your FTP numbers are better outside versus inside?
Go ahead,
I
Jackie.
don't have outdoor numbers.
Yeah,
I have never raced outdoors with a power meter. So I can tell you I only have indoor data.
I have never ridden my bike outside ever. It's even when I was a little kid. So I'm just kidding about that. But I don't have a power meter.
In the garage, just in circles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had my...
Don't hurt yourself, Rick. So I guess I'll be the one to answer this question, because I have both. Yeah, there's definitely people that can't do as much indoors as out, and there's a far fewer that can do more indoors than out. There's a few like that, but there's definitely some people that just can't get the biomechanics right, and maybe if they spent more time with their setup and especially the cooling. When people tell me, oh, my FTP is 30 watts lower inside than out, it's a cooling thing, man. That's the fan. You got to get that Lasco action. You got to get what Jackie's got.
No, I have mine right up here.
Yeah, that's what kills your FTP indoors more than anything. For me, mine's probably about, I've done PRs both, like indoor and out. They're within a few watts. But I came up in Canada riding the trainer for like 5 months a year from my formative days. So I learned how to use a trainer pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general consensus had been, from everything I read, and this was like a couple years ago when I used to read more about the comparisons, is that everything is a little bit higher outside. My impression is that I think everything is evening out because so many people are starting to ride more and more and more indoors. So before, indoors sucked. Sitting there trying to do an FTP test while you're watching another race, or you're watching Netflix, or you're just staring at nothing, you're not gonna be very good. You're just not gonna be that good but now in Zwift, or in a Zwift race, or with a lot of the training tools that we have inside now, I feel like you can find the same motivation inside as outside,
Yeah. And in the end of the day, it's your body. You should be able to get it out. It's a forced production test. So yeah, if there's a big disparity on either, I would look at what goes into it. Outside, some people get overwhelmed when they've been on the trainer a lot, and they can't put the power out outside. They're thinking about gearing all the time, thinking about where the road is. So yeah, it takes a little acclimation, but you should be able to get there.
Yeah. And Jonathan asks, so he asked one question, but then he had an interesting twist on it that I would like to hear from you both. So his question is your cadence typically higher or lower than is it higher indoors or outdoors? And then he says he's much lower in real life, but he also says he rides at 30 to 50% trainer difficulty. So what do you two think on cadence? And I have a lot of thoughts on this.
So I'll start because I am actually all over the board for this. In races, I have a very high cadence. When I do, a Zwift race, my cadence is anywhere from 95 to 100, and that's
Unbelievable.
very, very
Same.
high. That being said, I have historically loved low cadence. Like when I was training on my CompuTrainer for a triathlon, like 3, 4 years ago, low cadence day was my favorite day. I wanted to go 70 to 80 RPM.
That's low, Al. That's low. Uh-oh.
That's what I wanted to go before they said drop cadence. Like that's just what I wanted to hang out. Later found out that I had a very long crank arm. So we actually changed that out. That was probably part of it. And I think particularly for indoor trainers, we touched on this briefly. I think a lot of it also has to do with which trainer you're on and the algorithms used to modulate cadence when you're in erg mode.
Yeah.
I'm very, very happy now hitting a bunch of different cadences, and it really depends on the race I'm in, the terrain I'm in, and the power I'm expecting to hold. For a TT, where I'm not expecting anybody to throw in a random sprint, where I'm not trying to just soft pedal and recover, where I'm not preparing for a sprint, yeah, I'm still happy to return to that 80 RPM, just kind of max, settle in, use a lot of muscular power. In a race where anything could happen, somebody could sprint to the front, I need to pull it down. I'm doing a much higher cadence just because I can respond better there and I can spin up to a sprint.
Okay, I have a question before you go any further. Are you intentionally doing a higher cadence, or is it just a function of you being in a race and like subconsciously you're trying to want to be able to respond?
A little bit of both. I mean, I'm caffeinated when it comes to races, so I have like that manic look in my eyes and let's do this.
Interesting. I think that highlights maybe the most important part of this question because people talk a lot. If you go on Zwift Riders or whatever, people talk a lot about cadence and what the optimal cadence is. I'm here to tell you it doesn't really matter at all. Like, I really don't think it matters as long as there's extremes where it really does. You shouldn't be at 120 RPM all the time. Shouldn't be at 60 RPM all the time. But like,
So what are you at, Jordan? You're like, oh, I'm a grinder. You're laughing at Jackie's 80 cadence. What are you at?
Okay, so here I did Everesting last summer. My
Outside?
average cadence, average cadence for that was 59.
Yeah, but you had a downhill though.
Okay, but I did a training ride today on Zwift, and it was like I did all my intervals up the hills, and I was averaging like 67 to 72 on those because I'm standing a lot, I'm grinding. And when I'm getting a little better at this, but for me, I moved to altitude several years ago, and I found my cadence dropped quite a bit because actually at lower cadences, you're more cardiovascularly efficient. You're using less oxygen because if you think about it, I lose a little bit of energy, laterally on each pedal stroke. So fewer pedal strokes means less loss. So it's more efficient. Now there's a limit because, your muscles will get wasted too. But yeah, my cadence came down quite a bit, and I consciously try to boost it up. But like if I do a time trial, probably 85 RPM. And at a different part of my career, I do it at 105, and the power's the same. And we talked about before the show a little bit, sprinting and stuff like that. I found that I need to boost my cadence for really explosive efforts. Like I need to consciously dump it into an easy year and really like to an uncomfortable level rip because I don't really have a big muscle mass or anything. So for that part, but for aerobic riding, like it doesn't matter. there's Ironman triathletes that have won at like 72 in Hawaii. It's for endurance, it's what you're comfortable with, and within a decent little range there. Probably 70 to 105 is probably the range of normality there, with exceptions. But yeah, and my cadence Zwift to road, pretty similar. Like if I have the trainer difficulty, we'll talk about that part of his question. If I have the trainer difficulty up enough where I feel the climbs, my climbing cadence will be low. My on the flats, I'll be 75 or 80, and that's pretty normal to outside as well. I find it easier to do high cadence outside. I don't know. The inertia as you accelerate on Zwift doesn't feel quite right, like a subtle level. I can't do 110 RPM as easy on Zwift, that's for sure.
All right, so my cadence outside is lower than it is inside, for sure. I don't trainer difficulty. I mean, I have mine set at like 25%, I think, and because I like to spin. So like I had a TTT where I averaged 102 or 103 RPM.
That's high.
Yeah, and like I'm always like 95 plus in races. In normal rides it's like 90 maybe, but what I have found on my trainer is, because I do a lot of my training and like I do trainer road workouts, like I was telling you to earlier. Like I do it in erg mode, and I find that my cadence is higher when I use erg mode. And I was talking to one of my buddies. He said this. He asked me about it. He's like, "Is your trainer?" And so he had the same experience.
It kind of rewards you for higher cadence, right? Just even subconsciously, because the faster you pedal, the easier the load gets.
Yeah.
So there's a good incentive there. I could see that.
Is that the deal? Because I mean, I noticed that. I mean, I was just doing a workout today. I look over because that's where my bike is. I'm not just like looking at Jackie every time. Yeah. Hey, virtual Jackie. But yeah, so is it a detriment for me to be upping my cadence in erg mode like that?
I don't think it matters. Again, unless you're doing something crazy, like 115, 120, you don't see it.
Okay.
And
I mean, I think there are definitely cardiovascular benefits to turning your feet over faster. Jordan was just saying that. I'm honestly a fan of a mixed salad of everything. I try to hit low cadence, like power, like turning stuff over at 60 RPM, to give my poor heart a break once a week, but also to build that strength. And then at the same time, I really do try to do some intervals where I'm just turning my feet over faster, getting ready for that, ready for anything race cadence. So I
Yeah.
100% endorse a healthy mix of everything. And, whatever you encounter on race day or in training, you're ready for.
just don't bully yourself about where you end up in the race, right? You definitely didn't lose because of your cadence, right? It's you should train it all, but you don't think that I'm a 72 RPM guy, I'm never gonna win. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, I know Trainer Road is they talk about cadence all the time, but then sometimes they're like, well, it doesn't really matter on the podcast. But like, yeah, I found that for me personally, it's like whatever makes sense. As long as, you don't get crazy on either end. But yeah. So great questions. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm not sure if that necessarily answers this question, because you said it's lower virtually and I said it's higher virtually. So I will have to rock, paper, scissors for it after the show and let everybody know how it goes. Best of 21.
Well, I think it's because Jordan doesn't ride with erg mode and you do.
Could be.
There you go.
So there we go.
Put it all together. This is like a web.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So that's pretty much it. Jackie, Saris the Bros Closet. I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what in the world I was thinking. Jackie, give your sponsors some plugs here. Let them know.
As I was saying, I love the H3 trainer. It's probably the best one I've worked with for all of the erg training I do, just because it, again, apropos of everything we talked about today, it really does let me play with cadence and prepare for high effort sprinting without penalizing me in terms of overcorrecting. So I love my H3. You guys can try that sometime and get off your Neo train.
Well, we should have somebody from Saris on the show sometime, because I have a bunch of questions. I have a million trainer questions.
Yeah,
and
tech.
they would love it.
That would be super. If you know somebody, Jackie, let them know that they are welcome. But it has to be a week when
reach
you're
out.
on too, though.
Sounds good.
So, all right, who else? Who else you got, Jackie?
Let's see. I have Noon. It is Noon. It's got the long U,
Ooh.
not none.
Am I saying
None of
none
that.
every time I do it?
Yep, yep. You've been saying
She's a
none.
non-athlete every week.
Yeah, noon athlete, like I have never said before. That's why they
Yep.
should sponsor me. Then I'll say it right.
Yeah. Like, as in, gets up at the crack of noon.
Not
I like
like the
that.
con.
I'm
And then
sorry.
and then just a special thanks to my coach Chris, the one who has prodded me to do those terrible FTP tests and argued with me about cadence and standing. So he's a wonderfully patient person, and part of the reason I have very strong opinions about all this. But it's worked, so it's been fantastic.
All right, Jordan, go for it.
Well, if Jackie's coach won't take you, I sure will. Peakfarmcoaching.com. Yeah, that's my business. That's where you can find me for any tips like Zwift stuff like we're talking today, or just general training. Elevate Webplex is my road team. We're going to kick off the season soon on the crit series. We'll be racing against Legion and all the big guns, so it'll be exciting. And yeah, Finesse Esports, they're fighting for a top 5 right now in the Premier League, so it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you both. Good luck to all the ZRL racers on Surrey Hills. Good luck to Finesse. Hope you get that top 5. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week.